Good morning. It's actually afternoon, but morning just felt like the right thing to say. I don't know what I want to talk about today. I have lots of videos that I need to upload. I've kind of taken a little bit of a break. I feel a little silly that I am still like posting all of these videos because I don't really think anybody is watching them, but I just think that I need to for some reason, so I'm gonna keep doing it. I've had some really good conversations with a friend, and it's kind of been like in the back of my mind a little bit. I think it's really important to have people who are like in your same line of consciousness, that believe the things that you believe, that are able to understand what you're saying without it having to be explained. And we had several conversations about healing and core beliefs and just the way that healing looks. And last night specifically, we were talking about how sometimes in life, when you are in this midst of healing, that people will talk about the importance of healing your inner child, and that that in order to completely heal or to move or process through your trauma, that there's going to be parts of you that, especially if you endured trauma when you were a child, there are going to be parts of you that you need to return back to when you were young. And I've even recently seen conversations about how you might go back to inner child, and then you'll realize okay, you've done the healing work for the inner child, but then you have to re-heal inner teenager. And essentially the whole point, right, is that you are going to revisit each version of yourself. And so there's going to be an inner child, and there's going to be an inner teenager, and there's going to be an inner young adult, and there's going to be versions of you that you assumed you would be by now, versions of you that you haven't been able to meet, and you have to heal those as well, because it's a loss, it's a grief, it's a grieving process. And as I'm saying that, I guess what I am being felt to share with you is that there is a therapy that is called IFS, Internal Family Systems, and it is a therapy technique that is becoming more valid, I suppose, in talk therapy, traditional talk therapy. However, it's interesting because it's a little bit more creative than other talk therapies are, in my opinion. And the reason why it is because there is an emphasis on the mind and body connection, as well as revisiting those prior versions of you, kind of. And what's really interesting about it is it's very integrative. It's really easy to couple it with other therapies. And it is one that I have slowly started coming to again and again. When I was doing my year in private practice therapy, I started to use it pretty intensely with some clients who had some pretty severe trauma. I was utilizing it to understand myself and to process my own trauma. And I felt that it was really, really helpful. And last night, when I was talking with my friend, we were talking about things that kind of coordinated with that IFS model. And so essentially that IFS model Let me try really hard to be extremely brief and concise. I am not great at that. I love words and I love to explain things. The best way to explain it is that there is this idea that each part of you, your anxiety, your depression, your inner you, your childhood you, your love to be outdoors, your love for organization, whatever it is, it kind of changes depending on the concept and context of what you're dealing with. But that each part of you is a whole person in their own entity. So it's almost like, it kind of reminds me of like the movie Split, where you see like this one person who has multiple identities, and it's not the same thing as like a multiple personality disorder at all, because it's essentially acknowledging that you are a system of you, if that makes sense. And so there's going to be various roots in your system, and each of those roots identifies as its own independent being. So your anxiety that you may have cultivated over the course of your life and your trauma, etc., also has fears, also has things that it hates, also has things that it loves. So another great example is like Inside Out. We kind of see this control panel, right, of emotions, and we see the base ones, right? But I think IFS is really easy to understand inside that, like, Inside Out depiction, because you are seeing each feeling as its own being, right? So it's kind of that idea. And so my friend and I, as I were mentioning before, were talking about some things that kind of really aligned in that model. And we talked about how when you're young, and you don't get the things that you need, and you struggle, and you maybe develop trauma from that thing, that as you grow up, some people, their trauma response is to become, for lack of a better word, it's like a savior, right? Like, people always talk about like having a savior complex. And it kind of goes hand in hand with like women who joke about how their type of man is a red flag man. Like, I can fix him, Taylor Swift's, but I love him, daddy, I can fix him, daddy. And we were specifically talking about it in terms of profession. That how when you come into social work, when you come into therapy, when you come into the mental health field, a lot of times you get asked the question, like, why is this what you want to do? In my opinion, good educators ask that question. And so often the response is, well, I want to help people. And together, my friend and I had said that it's not a laughable answer. It's a noble thing to want to help people. It really is. However, if your desire to help people is stemming from a trauma response, is stemming from a lack of needs being met, and you're unhealed, you are engaging in an inauthentic version of you, unintentionally. But what I say when I mean that is that what I mean when I say that is that so often you hear that, like, oh, I just want to help people, and then my educator said, that's not enough. That's not enough, Emily. Why? What is your why? Because you are going to face and interact with hundreds and thousands of families and people who you will become emotionally attached to, because it is your job to care about them. And you will inevitably experience things that will break you. Your client dies. Your client completely neglects themselves. Your client does not listen to you and overdoses. Your client decides that therapy isn't important or they're not worth it. Families losing coverage, families losing care, families experiencing abuse in court, and kids trying to do the right thing for themselves, finding their way through their own trauma and their own healing, and their families looking at them like, what the hell are you fucking doing? Because it's not this. And you're gonna come home and we're gonna live life like we did. And you just put that baby through so much trauma so that they were able to find their own peace. And they're gonna have to go home to a war again. So it's not enough just to want to help. Because even in that desire to help, it is so easy to be broken and to say, I'm not going to do this shit anymore because I can't handle it. How many times I think about, I'm sorry, it just kind of hit me. I think about how sometimes people will say there's only so much hurt that a relationship can endure before a relationship is over. And I always used to agree with that. And I think like that's what's really resonating with me in that kind of a metaphor, is that when you're in a profession like this, there's only so much hurt that you can endure because you are willingly putting yourself on the front lines, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, many times. Man, it's tough. And for some people, it is absolutely their calling, right? And I really believed that it was mine for a very long time. And I think I had a purpose in it. I think that I am really great at it. I think that I have been given gifts to connect with people that many people don't have. And that strength for me was so amazing in my work. However, like I mentioned, if your intention was to serve people because you want to be the person that you never got, that's the other answer that happens a lot. Why do you want to do this work? I want to be the person who helped my family in hospice. I want to be the counselor that I never went to and never got to see that I was struggling. I want to be the worker that would have taken me out of the home because it wasn't safe. I want to fill in the blank. And wow, I'm sorry, man. It's just like the feelings are really hitting me about it today. We were talking about how that ultimately leads to this internal struggle for a lot of people, and it did for me. And the internal struggle was, I have now built a career. I have now built a life. I have built a foundation. My education, my merit, my accomplishments. I had 2 bachelor degrees. I have a master's degree. I have years of experience in social work. I started technically working in social work when I was in college, my freshman year. So let me think about that. Almost 10 years. But I've been doing volunteer work and community planning and mission trips and since I was a kid. So community work, social work, since I was a kid. With this feeling, with this drive to create an ability to see people for who they are, for where they are, without shame, without judgment, without fear, maybe, and for them to just have one person just be there. And even though that does light me up, and it did, and it does, I really believe that a lot of what was driving me in that capacity was the fact that I was searching for something that I never got. I was desperate for anybody to notice me and to see that I was strong, but I was struggling. That I was capable, but I was vulnerable. That I was wise, but I was a kid. That I was good, that I had good behavior, that I had good grades, that I listened to my parents, that I was a part of the church, that I was part of the community, that I was everything to everyone else. But I wasn't sure what I was to me. And I wasn't sure that people were there for me. And that idea, that feeling, is trauma. That feeling is emotional neglect. I was a baby. I was 12. I was 10. I was a young girl. And I was a therapist to my friends, and I was a therapist to my mother, and I was obedient, and I was community driven, and I was smart, but I wasn't smart enough to fit in with the smart kids, and I wasn't creative enough to be recognized in that kind of capacity, and I wasn't willing to engage in certain kind of behavior to hang out with the rest of the kids that just fucked around to fuck around. And I always felt that I was a friend to everyone without a true friend for me, just me, who saw me and cared about me unconditionally. We forget that positive labels can be labels too. And that's a really big conversation right now, that to check on your strong friend, right? Because they're the ones who aren't going to reach out, but they're the ones who need you. And I think that's a good indicator of what I'm talking about. So with that feeling, with that drive, with that motivation, Emily climbed the ladder. And she thought, I want to help people. I want to be what I didn't get. And for me, I really needed somebody when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I needed somebody when I was trying to figure out who I was, what my identity was, who my friends were, whether I agreed with the morals and the values that I had been raised with or not, whether I believed that the things that I had been taught were true or not. And in all capacity, I don't mean just religion and values, and of course those things are true too. We go through an assessment and an evaluation, hopefully, as we gain our own independent consciousness, right? Our own independent identity. But I needed to know that I had somebody who had my back if I decided that the feelings that I had about the way that I was raised were not true. Or that actually I don't really think it happened like that. You're telling me it did, but it didn't feel like that to me. And so as I built this career and these milestones, I thought that I was getting closer and closer to my purpose. Because my purpose was to be what I needed when I was 13 to 20. And as a result, I did a really great work with adolescents. Fantastic work. And every single kid that I got the pleasure of knowing blessed me. I'm not incredibly religious in the very traditional way, but blessed me. Whew, and I will carry them forever. And I got into my degrees, and I got into my master's program, and I got so far. And then things started to change for me. I started, as I'm making this ladder, I'm accomplishing these things, and I'm starting my own healing process. I'm reevaluating what it was like to grow up. I'm reevaluating what my feelings were as opposed to what I was told that they were. I am reevaluating my experience. I am reevaluating the information that I've been given with this new knowledge that I have sought and gained from an education. And I'm no longer able to keep continuing down this path the way that I thought, because life happened and I was suddenly gonna have a baby. And I was okay with that. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I was just meant to do my social work master's, and maybe not this art therapy stuff. At least for right now. And then I do community mental health. And again, blessed to have been a part of the lives that I was. The individuals that I worked with were amazing. my clients were human. They were resistant and challenging and owned their trauma in a way that I had never. That's not true. I had seen it before in some of my other kiddos. But in a different way, I guess. It was enlightening in a different format. Because these kiddos had been through so much. These kiddos were in young adults at that point in my life were victims or at risk of human trafficking. So they had some stories. Some really awful ones. And they still were able to sit in the vulnerability of what makes us just human and emotionally aware and vulnerable. Like, vulnerability just keeps coming into my brain. And truthfully, I think many of them were not in a place that they were ready to sit there and process it. They were young. It hadn't been that long since all of these things had happened to them. But looking back, all I can think about is the fact that it is amazing that we as humans have the ability, that our body, our brains have the ability to go through the worst of the worst things that we can think about, and still fight with ourselves over the idea that there is something that we could be doing, that we could be going to school to get our cosmetology license or our nursing license, that we could have plans and desires to build friendships and to draw anime and to create the connections with the social worker who's gonna come every Tuesday and hang out with me for 2-3 hours, and we're gonna talk and we're gonna chat and we're gonna build a relationship, and she's gonna help me with whatever I need because she just wants to be there. And I'm going to be receptive. That is such a blessing. And then I moved into private practice. And I did that for a year, and I felt the same exact way. It's such a blessing to have known all of these young people. I saw all age ranges, but a lot of my caseload was pretty young. Adolescents and young people. And I slowly started to grow that population and started to take on adults. And seeing that feeling, that ability that I had seen in these previous populations that I've worked with, that it just expanded, right? That I have people who are 50 years old who are talking to me about the same things that 18-year-old is. That life and trauma and healing does not have a timeline. That there is a 60-year-old man who is struggling with the same thing that 14-year-old girl is. That they both recognize parts of themselves that they don't necessarily love because that's who their parent was. And that's how they were taught to understand and to perceive their own life. That they are both adamantly trying to understand what a healthy relationship looks like and how do I accomplish it. And they are doing it with another human who is doing the same thing. That yes, I have degrees, don't get me wrong, but I am building, or was at the time, the only healthy relationship that I had ever known. It is marvelous and wonderful and awful and treacherous and debilitating and vulnerable, and I could not give you enough adjectives to be a human in this world. And as I was able to process that and be there and to be in that moment fully, and to do the inner work and to know relationship healing and to know how my past had provided insight, knowledge, education, limiting beliefs, what kind of foundation I had created out of my pain, out of my trauma, and then how I had utilized that to create a purpose. And I was so proud of myself. And I still am. But as I made peace with what had happened to me and why I had come so far in the direction that I had come in, I realized that I had done all of this to be able to hold the hand of a younger me. I had done all of this so that someday I could know in my heart, in my soul, that I was able to touch 1,000. That sounds weird the way that I say that, but 1,000 little Emilys and say, I'm here for you. I see you. Maybe nobody else does in your life, but this 1 hour that I'm going to spend with you this week, I do. And I will, and I always will. I was giving hope. And what a beautiful thing, right? And as I was doing that, I was giving hope to myself. That it's okay that I never felt that way. It's okay that I didn't have that. Because for whatever reason, I wasn't supposed to, and now I get to do this for all of these other people. And I still feel that way. But I started this with that conversation with my friend. And talking about how sometimes in that healing journey we come to this spot that I've explained to just now. And for me, I realized that even though I had the song Time of My Life, I had the time of my life and I owe it all to you, that I had the time of my life with all of these people that I was able to help, but really they were able to help me. I realized that I was building a life out of pain. Not out of true internal desire, not out of true alignment, not out of, I know that this is what I'm meant to do, even though I felt that way when I was doing it. I felt that way because I was so good at it. And I was so good at it because I knew what it was like. Because I had been there. No, I've not ever experienced the things that you have. No, I'm never going to pretend to say that I know what it's like to be in your shoes, because I don't. I don't. But I do know what it's like to go through something that nobody else has. I do know what it's like to feel alone in it. I do know what it's like to need so desperately for someone to see you and hear you and be there for you. And my friend and I, as we were talking about it, she said, and that's countertransference. In therapy, we talk about transference and countertransference. And it's this idea that clients can project their own feelings onto us as therapists, as clinicians, as whatever your title is. That as they are struggling to understand themselves and the feelings and the emotional responses that they have and that they are holding, they may attach that to us. They may believe that that is what we believe about them. And countertransference is when we as therapists do that to them. And I want to be clear that these are definitions that are taught in order for us to be ethical about practice, to be mindful about boundaries, to be mindful about self-awareness, right? And to be extremely clear, I don't feel that I ever pushed my feeling onto clients at all. However, working with, and I also had a supervisor and communicated those things and worked through those things. I had a therapist some of the time, and being able to really process that, and those things are really important. They really are. But I say it because sometimes you don't understand the impact of something until after you are out of it, right? You do not have the awareness until you are able to remove yourself from that situation. And for me, I didn't feel that way at all until after I decided that I was going to leave private practice and that I was going to give myself a chance to maybe do something that I was just excited about because I was just excited about. Not because somebody told me to, not because I thought it was the right thing to do, not because I thought it was noble, not because I was good at it, even, to be frank. Like, even though I wanted to be good at it. But I said, like, I'm never gonna do therapy again, I don't think. Like, I don't think I will ever leave social work completely because it does feel innate to me, but I don't know that I was meant to hold as much emotional baggage as I have held. Because if I have known you, I have known you. I have known your soul, I've analyzed it, I have held it, I have nurtured it as much as I possibly can, and I am going to breathe life into you. And again, what a blessing to do so. However, if you are consistently breathing life into other people with the intention of trying to breathe life into yourself, what is really happening? Are you using someone? Are you manipulating your gift? Are you loving inauthentically? Do you know that? Are those things not true but risks? I don't know. There's just some things there, right? But afterwards, I realized that if I were to continue therapy, that I would always be sitting in the place to hold 13-year-old me's hand. And if I am always sitting in the place to hold 13-year-old me's hand, I never get to see 28-year-old me and walk with her. And I never get to see 30 and 40 and 50-year-old Emily, who gets to do things that she's never imagined before. At some point, there is a time that we realize that the baggage that we carry with us needs to be relinquished. That maybe it can stay in the room, but as a distant memory, that we sort through it and we donate it out. That no matter what we do, what we have been through has made us, but that doesn't mean that it needs to live on our back either. And not for everybody, but for some healers, for some thinkers, for some helpers. We believe that helping other people through their own releases our own, releases our baggage, releases the weight that we have carried with us, but it only adds more. We are collecting mementos and stones to be able to honor and validate what we've been through, and that's worthy. But it's not righteous. It's not always helpful to us, even if we believe it to be in the moment. I wonder if you were given the opportunity to answer the miracle question. Give you some therapy that I haven't been able to for a long time. The miracle question is, if a miracle were to take place in your life, how would you know that it occurred? If a miracle happened overnight while you were asleep and you woke up, that miracle's presence has been fulfilled. How would you know that it occurred? What would be different? What would be the same? How would you feel? Would other people know? Don't just tell me you got $1 million. I want you to tell me what your soul has to say about it. And if the answer to your miracle question has anything to do with relieving yourself of the weight that you have carried, what if I told you that you could have set it down already? What if I told you that a miracle didn't have to take place in order for you to feel free, even if it feels that way?